After what feels like an absolute age, Luton Town are at Kenilworth Road in Premier League action again on Tuesday night, when Brighton and Hove Albion are the visitors. Alongside me to preview the game is regular guest, the Lutonian journalist, James Cunliffe. James, you ready for some Premier League football under the lights at the Kenny?
It's been a long while.
It has been too long. Yeah, we'll preview it after this intro.
Can you believe it? We are Premier League! Yes!
I love this town. I love this town. I love this town. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got these massive souls.
We're Luton people, and that's what we care about.
Hello everyone, welcome along to another episode of the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast. I'm Kev, as I said before the intro. James is alongside me as always, and we're previewing the return fixture from the opening Premier League game of the season. Brighton and Hove Albion visitors to Kenilworth Road. Last time I remember Brighton coming to Kenilworth Road, James, was the JPT semi-final in 2009, so it's 15 years ago, and they haven't come since then, have they? Because we haven't been in the same division as them since. So very much a game to look forward to for a few reasons. Obviously, it'll be a good game because Brighton are a good team to watch, but this will be the classic how much have Luton improved game of football, because we were a bit green around the gills, weren't we, when we went down there? A little bit. I mean, Alan Shearer in hindsight was actually quite right. We were a bit naive compared to where we are now. We will get a real indication in this game of just how far we've come in this division.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it seems a lifetime away, that game. And the change in Luton is so much more impressive since then. It probably would have been fair for pundits to say that Luton are in a bit of bother after that first game. I mean, a bit premature, albeit, but they're all changing their tune now. And yeah, not quite out of the relegation zone yet, but obviously still got that game in hand. And I'm far more confident about this one than, say, if you'd asked me immediately after that trip down to Sussex, because Luton are going really well. And Brighton had a great weekend in the Cup as well, but in the league it's not particularly gone that well for them in recent weeks and months.
No, it hasn't. 3 wins in their last 15 Premier League games. If you'd bet 1-1 in Brighton games, you'd be akin to winning the lottery in recent times, because there's an awful lot of 1-1 draws. I mean, that game down there, for all the 4-1 looks bad, we should remember it was only 2-1 until Pelly tried to do something that he shouldn't have done in his own penalty box. That's not going to happen on Tuesday night. And then, of course, we're tired and they got another one in injury time. Wasn't as bad as it looked. But they're a good side. Like you say, they've just put 5 past Sheffield United. I don't know if that's much of a barometer in terms of a form guide.
Burnley did that.
Indeed. But the 2 games previous to that, they failed to score against Wolves, failed to score against West Ham. And as I say, they are struggling to get over the line in winning games of football. Just 3 in 15 Premier League games. Yes, there's injuries, a lot of injuries. Yes, they're playing European football for the first time. But that's a long period of time for just 3 wins. I mean, even Luton have got 3 Premier League wins in that time. So given all the plaudits that they get, rightly so, for the football that they play, form-wise, there isn't a great deal between these 2 teams.
No, not at the moment. I mean, they'd have had that boost from playing so well in the Cup, but and they've played so well in the European competitions as well. They've done fantastically well, and it's somewhat taken the shine off their Premier League experience. Well, after that first game, everybody was tipping them to be challenging for top 6, maybe even an outside bet for a top 4. I think that's slipped a bit now. I imagine they could probably still make top 6, but I don't think they're going to be a top 4 team on the form that they're on. And these are all things really that Luton can potentially capitalise on. I mean, they're not conceding the amount of goals that first game suggested, even as rightly you say that I think you can almost sort of discount those first 2 goals in the way they came about, because it was never a 4-1 game. But They're harder to beat, especially at home. You've got to have all the confidence in the world because you've given Liverpool, Tottenham, Arsenal, Manchester City, and Newcastle really good games. And there's as good a football as Brighton play. The football that Manchester City were playing was different level as well, and Luton coped.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. A lot of Brighton injuries to good players as well, which is a good thing for us. I mean, if you think back to that opening day of the season, Kaoru Mitoma basically tore us a new one. He wouldn't have played anyway because he'd have been at the Asian Cup, but he's out with injury. Simon Adingra scored the 4th goal that afternoon. My memory serves me right. Might have been the 3rd one. They all blended into one at the end. He's away at the Africa Cup of Nations. They've got Solly March, scorer of the opening goal that day. He's out injured. They've got some other injured players. Ansu Fati's got a good reputation on loan from Barcelona. He's also out injured. So there's a lot of injuries to deal with. And I was just thinking, it's a rare game that we're playing against a team and we haven't got someone coming up against their former club. But then news breaks over the weekend that we might be coming up against one of our former players in this game. I don't know if Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, A, will sign, and B, play in the game even if he has signed. But if they sign Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, we know full well they're getting a mighty, mighty good footballer.
Yes, really. I mean, he wasn't in the squad, was he, for Leicester in the Cup? So it suggests there might be something in it. And certainly £30 million is the price tag being bandied about. We've all seen Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall and everything that he did in that season, and we'd have loved him to stay. I mean, it was a revelation then. Unfortunately, it was behind closed doors, and the fans weren't in to see it, but they took to him anyway from when they were watching from their sofas during lockdown. But he was a wonderful, wonderful player. It's remarkable. You can say this a lot about Luton, but it just shows how far they've come. That it's not forgotten, but we've got Ross Barkley now, so it's like different levels. But he's a top talent, really, and I'm surprised that Leicester even contemplating it, because it looks like they're going to be shoo-ins to be back in the Premier League, and that's his hometown club. So you'd imagine that, from a personal level, he might want to stay there, but you're not going to turn down the opportunity to play in Europe. I don't know if he can get in that squad. I haven't looked into that, but a team that's going to be pushing for those sorts of competitions, as long as they improve their form, and hopefully not at Kenilworth Road.
Yep, he would get into the European squad. I'm guessing it's an FFP thing, which is why Leicester are letting him go, because like you say, they'll be a Premier League team next season, won't they? That's for sure. It's a weird thing, isn't it? When Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall left us, if you'd said 2 seasons later there's no guarantee he'd get into our midfield, I'd have called you barking. But let's be honest, with Sambi and Ross Barkley, he certainly wouldn't be an automatic selection in the centre of our midfield, that's for sure. So we don't know if Kiernan, A, is going to sign for them, and B, going to play. If he does sign for them, I hope he comes out onto the pitch so that Luton fans can show the appreciation of him, of his efforts in that season, where it's just incredible. Even like you say, even if we could only see it on a computer screen. But one man who is going to play and probably won't get quite the same reception, is, from the Luton fans anyway, is João Pedro, top scorer for Brighton this season. I think it's 19 overall this season, but only 7 of those have come in the Premier League. So he's basically killed Europe, and he scored a hat-trick against Sheffield United at the weekend. Gets a lot of penalties, this bloke. Falls down an awful lot for some of these penalties, has to be said. Hello, first game of the season. So yeah, we need to stop him from getting a penalty to take, because I'm pretty sure I saw in the match of the day on Saturday night he hasn't missed one for Brighton yet. He's a threat that we need to control. But the last time he was at Kenilworth Road, the only time we knew he was here was when he belted that ball 3/4 of the way to Dunstable and got booked for it. So if he wants to produce that performance again, happy days. He is going to have some crowd jip to put up with.
He is, and hopefully that his output is the same as that wonderful, wonderful day when Luton beat Watford, because you have to say, in the return, in the fixture before that, up at their place, he was fantastic. And if he can play like that, he's a hell of a threat, because that was playing that side, which was rubbish, and he was they're head and shoulders their best player. But Luton gave him so much space in that game, and he was able to run with the ball and cause so much havoc. And I don't see that happens in this particular game. But he showed with one of those finishes at the weekend in the FA Cup, the long range one, that you only have to give him half a yard and he can stick it in the back of the net from 18, 20 yards. So that is it is a concern, because you score a hat-trick against anyone in the FA Cup, and the amount of goals he has been scoring, he's going to be in confident form. So yeah, he is a threat, and just don't touch him in the box, because we know what's going to happen.
Yeah, don't touch him, don't breathe on him, don't do nothing to him on the box, because, he wasn't even, or he barely touched at their place, and down like a sack of spuds. They kind of sort of alternate between Evan Ferguson and Danny Welbeck, don't they, as their sort of main centre forward. Pedro's playing the Matoma role out left at the minute. I'm kind of hoping, and I hope this doesn't come back to haunt me, that it's Welbeck that they play with. So I think we can deal with him a lot better than Ferguson. Ferguson looks like a real talent to me, and I don't know why they're not utilising that more. Whereas Welbeck, you know what he does. He's not going to surprise you now. You just got to deal with it. And yes, he's had a good career. England international, Arsenal, Manchester United, now thriving at Brighton. But I kind of feel with the defensive trio that we've got set up that we'd be able to deal with that.
Yeah, I would see that Ferguson's a bit more of a threat, because from what I've seen, and I know he's on a bit of a drought at the moment, but that's always worrying, isn't it? Because I think it's 10 games that he hasn't scored, or it might have been 10 games before the Sheffield United Cup game. That's always a worry. If any fan that knows a player that can finish like he can, seems like he's quite a natural. Give him a chance and then he'll score, and so that is a worry. So if for any reason he's not playing, that would be good.
Yeah, he started the game at their place on the bench, didn't he? And still didn't stop him coming on and scoring. So hopefully he stays on the bench a wee bit longer this time. The other one that's fit and sort of dangerous, maybe not so much from a goal scoring point of view, but the man who ticks it all together is Pascal Gross. I'm amazed how long it took him to become a German international, because he's been a good player in the Premier League for a long, long time. Obviously, he'd be in the Alfie Doughty, Ross Barkley situation, in that he only plays for Brighton. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I really do like Brighton. But in the wider world, he only plays for Brighton. But, he's a really, really good player. He's just had international quality for a long time, from whenever I've seen him.
He is a really impressive player. And one thing that really struck me, I mean, it's not necessarily about Gross, but really about their play. And like you say, he's part of that engine that keeps it ticking. But they were passing gorgeous triangles around Sheffield United, and they couldn't cope with that whatsoever. So there's something in there about pressing at the right time, because we know Luton want to press, and hopefully they've learnt the lesson from the first game, that you press them relentlessly too much and too quickly and not at the right times, which is a difficult skill to master, but they will ping it round you.
The one thing you would say, though, the big difference between that game, the big difference is obviously the experience we've got in the Premier League, but another difference from the game on the opening day of the season to Kenilworth Road is they stretch the pitch so wide. The two wingers are on each sideline, basically, and then they just give the midfielders all the space in the world to play. Well, I mean, if they try that, one's going to be at KFC and the other one's getting run over on Howard's Way. So, it's not necessarily going to be that easy this time, is it? And I think that's what Manchester City struggled with for that first hour, getting their wide players into the game, because they were all inside, weren't they? Grealish was picking the ball up between the 18-yard line. Foden was doing the same thing. And if this lot are exactly the same, then we might find containing them slightly easier at Kenilworth Road than what we did down there, regardless of the fact that we're a 10 times better side now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that can play its part. The atmosphere as well, night game, we'll know where that brings. But coming back to the original point you made, one of the very interesting things will be how much ball Luton can have, because for 3 games now they've had the most possession, up around the 60% mark, and that's what Brighton average, sort of 62%, I think, I'm right in saying.
Most in the league, I think I'm right in saying, including Manchester City.
Yeah, absolutely. They really do keep it well and play it well. And like I say, against Sheffield United, the Blades couldn't cope whatsoever with their one-touch passing. It was wonderful. But it will be a huge benchmark to see how Luton cope with that. And I wouldn't be disappointed if they, for the first time in 4 games, they didn't have the most amount of ball, but they've got to have more than they did at their place down on the coast. But then it's about what you can do with it, isn't it? And certainly since then, well, we talk a lot about the set pieces, but also the record of goals in the final stages as well. Those things are hugely important, I think.
Yeah, they really are. Obviously, we're recording this ahead of Rob's press conference. We're recording Sunday night, so we can get this out to you relatively early. And Rob's press conference is on Monday, so we might be a bit sketchy team news-wise, but we'll give it our best shot. We think Gabe Osho will be fine. We think he was rested as a precaution on Saturday. He's just had a few sort of aches in his ankle, hasn't he? So you didn't need to risk him, and as it proved, we didn't need to risk him. There'll be no Issa Kabore. He's playing 2 hours earlier for Burkina Faso. In fact, he might actually be playing at the same time, so I think they are the later game that night against Mali. We wish him the best of luck in that round of 16 game. If they win, good for him and them. If they lose, he'll be back for Newcastle, so happy days. No Marvellous Nakamba, that much we do know. We haven't actually touched on this, James, so let's quickly touch on that. Sounds like he's out for a long time. I think we're talking right into the deeper echelons of this season, if this season at all. And whilst it's not the blow that it might have been because the 2 central midfielders are just elite, we still love to have Marv pushing them, wouldn't we?
Yeah, well, he just gives up so much. He makes the midfield so much more solid when he plays, and I think that we didn't really get to see the 3 of them. We really did want to see them. We waxed lyrical in one podcast about it, that we wanted to see that 3, but I think the 2 of those, Barkley and Lokonga, have come in and performed so well. I mean, they give completely different things than Marv does. Marv will break things up, and he's so difficult to get past, and those are great qualities. Whereas Ross likes to play on the turn and get his head up and move forward. And I guess Lokonga is sort of a mix between the 2 of them. Well, certainly I didn't anticipate he would be, but he can do the rough stuff really well. And then when he does get his head up, he can pass it. So I think that's probably helped a lot. But I mean, they're going to have to. They play to such high intensity levels that we're talking. Can they manage it throughout the whole season? And God forbid one of them gets an injury, then it's a bit of a worry. But yeah, I mean, I asked Rob in the FA Cup pre-match presser about how long it would be, and he said months. And really, when you get to January, there ain't that many of them left, are they? So I would be very surprised if he comes back this season, to be honest.
Yeah, this season does back up in fixtures towards the end of it, and obviously we've got 2 to rearrange. But the time to get up to full speed and everything else, if we do see Marv, it's not going to be for too much. So that's a bit of a shame. On the plus side, we have Jordan Clark back available for this game. Probably not going to get selected in the starting 11 in those 2 midfield slots like he was at Bolton. But he could be the wide left one should we go down that route. The availability of Jacob Brown's a bit quiet. He had an issue, didn't he, for the original Bolton game, although he was suspended for the Burnley game. But yeah, nothing with regards to his fitness ahead or after the Everton game.
Yeah, it's a bit of a concern, that one, if he's out, because he's so effective certainly in the press, which we briefly touched on about how Luton are going to have to get that quite spot on really against Brighton. So hopefully he's not out for too long. I think it was a knee for the original game, wasn't it, that he was out with? So that's always a tricky one. The fact he wasn't included at all would suggest, I think, that the Tuesday game is going to be a bit too quick for him.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I see it. Or if he is selected, it would only be on the bench instead of maybe one of the youth teamers that was on the bench, or rather one of the goalkeepers. We don't need 2 goalkeepers on the bench. that were at Goodison Park. Obviously, the goalkeeper changes around in this game. Kaminsky will be back between the sticks. Townsend will play. I mean, he kind of gave us a indication of who's going to play with the substitutions he made at Goodison Park, didn't he? Elijah went off, Doughty went off, Barkley went off, Lokonga went off, Townsend went off. It was those five are getting protected for Tuesday. We probably knew that they were all going to play anyway. It's just that left-sided attacking role, isn't it? That probably will be Clark if Brown isn't fit, you would imagine. I wouldn't have thought he'd go Morris and Elijah in the same game, but he could do.
You know, it's one up for debate, because I thought Morris really did that supporting role well, because when you saw the two of them on the team sheet, you initially automatically, I should say, expect them to be two up front. But it was more Elijah up top, wasn't it, with Morris, one of the ones in support, and I thought he played really quite well, and it could be an option. We'll see, because he hasn't started that many Premier League games so far, but his performances have been good coming off the bench, and that's all you can ask for, to put your hat in the ring for it. And it's essentially what Elijah did when he had to have a spell on the sidelines, albeit he came up and scored goals.
Yeah, we've never really covered this, but I don't know if it's because we had a run of away games or tough home games or whatever, but we seem to have morphed into a 3-4-2-1, don't we?
Yeah.
As opposed to a 5-2-3 or 5-3-2 or however it was that you saw it. It's very firmly a back three. It's very firmly that the wing backs are always in front of that back three, and it's Lokonga who drifts in to make a four when they go forward. But it's definitely two behind, one up front, isn't it? It always used to be one left, one right of a central man, with the two wingers sort of coming back and making a four in midfield. That's definitely not the case now. That four is made up of the two fullbacks. That's a big change, a subtle change in terms of the fact that no one's obviously noticed it and made a big thing of it. But the impact it has on us in possession in particular, we've now got, if you want, four sort of banks to pass through, as opposed to the before, where we've mentioned on this podcast a few times, particularly when Morris was in the side, there was 50 yards between him and anyone. Now there's lots of support for Elijah up there, and we are so much the better for it, as every statistic will tell you.
It is a very interesting development, in the positive, because you need to be able to tweak things in that way. You could go three up top, like you were saying, like it was, but in that one, it does feel like there is more of a pathway through the middle of the pitch when they're playing, which is good, because a lot of the play does come down the wing, and when a team susses that out, you're going to have another plan, aren't you? So it's a very interesting one, and one to watch and keep your eye on, I think.
Yep, would agree. It's very, very fluid, and obviously the cleverness of Andros Townsend and the roles and the spaces that he can find, that's a large part of it. And actually, Jordan Clark did exactly the same at Burnley as well. So, yeah, definitely one to keep an eye on, that formation change. That's something. It's something that I have kind of noticed, but I've not really wanted to mention it, just in case it was I just noticed it as a sort of nuance within a game. But
if we let the cat out of the bag, then
well, I would imagine, all these teams have got so many analysts.
They know about it,
yeah,
but,
exactly. But no one's asked Robert.
It hasn't really been talked of. No. I think it's an interesting one, like I say, to keep your eye on, because we've talked about evolution, and sometimes it can be bandied around a lot, but really and truly, if you think about what Edwards inherited, and he didn't want to really mess about with it too much, and he just sort of played to the strengths, and he's this season added different aspects of it, along with the coaching staff as well, and he'll credit those too. But it's not unnoticed when you've been playing so well and getting decent results, that these little tweaks to the system are starting to emerge. I think it's very interesting thing to watch from afar. Not even afar. Watch them from the stand. But to keep your eye on it, because if we're talking about how well Luton are playing and all the different things that they're doing well, and that's one of them, I think.
And I just think it's interesting because the 2 behind 1 just suits so many more players as opposed to the 3, the 2 wide alongside 1. The 2 behind would suit Chong, who's probably not suited to being wide left in the way that we saw Chio against Liverpool, for example. It definitely suits Clark. It would suit Townsend. Doesn't have as much ground to cover, at his stage of his career. It will suit a Corley Woodrow. It will suit a Carlton Morris, who can play slightly behind. It would suit Luke Berry. So many more players are suited by that, and pretty much all of those, with the exception of Chio, that I've just mentioned, would much rather be in those roles than out-and-out wide roles. Maybe it's Brown who would prefer the out-and-out wide role. Chio also, perhaps. But there's so many more options for those 2 roles that it just brings the squad much more into the game, whereas you kind of, back in the sort of earlier part of the season, you was kind of looking at it was, how do we get Clark into this, involved in this? How do we get Chong regularly involved in this, and a couple of others? But now you can see it because there's 2 spots there that they're spreading out around 5 or 6 options.
Yeah, and even Woodrow, we were talking in the last podcast about how he was a striker, but Nathan brought him in and thought he could play as a number 10, and then that role was almost made extinct by the way that they were playing. But if this is another way that he can come in and be effective, then it opens up the squad, doesn't it, more? Because we know how well the players that have been on the bench and come off and made an impact and changed games. And that would only be enhanced by if you're playing in a position that suits you more. And previously, maybe at the start of the season, they couldn't fit him in there, but now they can. Obviously, the ones you said, like Clark and Berry, tailor-made for that sort of stuff. But it's an impressive little tweak that sort of takes in mind all the players, all the sort of fringe players, if you like, their strengths that can really impact on this side.
Yeah, it does. So that's something for everyone to look out for on Tuesday. So it might well be then, with that in mind, that it is Morris and Elijah and Townsend as the 3 of those.
And then there's so much goal threat in that as well, isn't there? Because, Morris has struggled for goals, but his confidence is up, I would say, and he's getting chances now, whereas before, when we talk about that barren spell, it wasn't getting any. I couldn't even think of the chances that he had, whereas Elijah was getting them and maybe missing them. And now they're both getting them. So if he's on the pitch, we know he can assist because he's had those impacts against Sheffield United and the like. But he's a goal scorer ultimately. If he's on the pitch, you've got a great chance to stick it in the unbag.
And the other thing, when you've got Carlton and you've got Eli on the pitch, and you've also got Osho and you've got Mengi, and you've got a couple of other tall guys on the pitch, set pieces, balls into the box, they're going to be all the more potent, because we mentioned earlier in the season that we've only got 1 in the box in open play, playing that old formation. Well, now you're going to have 2, 3, 4, and for a set piece, it's like Land of the Giants in there, isn't it? And that is particularly big on Tuesday, because this lot are very poor at defending crosses. They really, you would think when you look at them, Lewis Dunk at the back, they'll be absolutely fine, but their record defending crosses and set pieces is not good. It's really, really bad. And, there aren't many better sides in English football at set pieces than Luton right now. And Alfie's gonna, he could have a field day with these set pieces and crosses from open play, particularly at Kenilworth Road, particularly in the atmosphere that we're going to be creating on Tuesday night.
And also, they didn't have to deal with Doughty in the first game because he wasn't in the starting lineup, was he?
Very true.
I think he came on, didn't he? If I remember rightly.
Yep.
But yeah, they were sort of comfortable towards the end of the game, so they wouldn't have had to deal with that for sure. But it's so important, Luton's wide play and Luton's crossing and set pieces, and if they can cause havoc in that side, then that's one way to get at them, because they are very, very good with the ball, and you're going to have to work hard to nullify them on that, but then break quickly, I guess. Hopefully it's not all counter, because I think Luton have grown into a team that can probably try and influence the game. But if it is if and when they do have that Liverpool style, not Liverpool the team, but when we played Liverpool, the way they countered in that game was so impressive and very quick, and obviously that ultimately led to the Chong goal, didn't it? So there's options there.
Yeah, and they are very good with the ball, but they do take risks, particularly at the back. And we're just the kind of side that, well, you know, will sort of reel them in and trigger them at some point. And yeah, I think there's joy for us in this game. I do. I mean, obviously, the question mark is how many we can keep them to, because they're a good side. But I would be very surprised if we don't score, and potentially score multiple times in this game. I think we are looking at a high-scoring game. I know their last 2 games have been 0-0. I don't see that here.
Well, I think they still average 2 goals a game.
I was trying not to bring that up. But
it's 2 point something goals a game, which is still impressive considering a lot of their recent results have been 1-1, but shows how many goals they were scoring at the start of the season, I suppose, doesn't it? And it shows how potent they were, which obviously is a threat, and you have to work to nullify that. But it is going to be a really fascinating tactical battle, I think. Whereas I'm not sure you could really say that in the first part of the season. We knew how Luton were going to play, and we were comfortable with it. But in this evolution period, and also in the sense of finding out where you are in comparison to that first game, there's a lot more tactical elements to this one, I think.
I think that became a thing after Brentford, didn't it? I think, you know, with Arsenal, we went toe-to-toe with them. Then Lokonga came back and he just gives so many options tactically, whether it's him who goes forward and drives with the ball, whether it's Barkley, whether it's the wide players and Lokonga sits in. You often see Lokonga picking the ball up in the right centre-back position these days and playing that diagonal straight away to Alfie Doughty. That's been a real thing. Obviously, he'll pick it up in midfield and he'll thread passes and things like that. He doesn't get the credit because Ross Barkley's in the team, but he's a big player for Luton Town now, Lokonga, and it interested me that Rob said he'd definitely buy him, but it's something we'll look at a later date, because if we can get him and Barkley's here for longer, as we had confirmed to us by Wilco, the shoots of a really good Premier League side are right there, isn't it? The seeds are planted. We're just waiting now for that tree to grow, and it's growing quicker than, well, any of us could ever have imagined.
Yeah, all over the pitch. It's so remarkable. I mean, we sound like a broken record, the amount of thought we're giving to this process, but it has been so quick and impressive. And Lokonga as well. He still hasn't really played that many games because he had that big long layoff because of the hamstring injury. But when he's come back in, he's been superb. And you're right, when you're talking about that transition, him and Barkley can make that happen from the defence to the attack really quickly and accurately. And it's almost like the old boxing analogy, isn't it? If the right one don't get you, the left one's gonna. Absolutely,
yeah. We've got 2 potent hooks now, that is for sure. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this game. I'm looking forward to this game from the game of football that it's going to be, but I'm really looking forward to seeing an exact measurement. Because, okay, we've seen how improved we've been against Burnley and against Everton, the 2 sides that we've played more than once in this league. But with no disrespect to them, they're not the greatest of benchmarks. This one would be if you've improved significantly against a Brighton side, who aren't going to be any worse than what they were at their place. They'll just have different personnel doing the same thing. That is a real confidence thing for the rest of the season. And let's not forget, this is a big night on Tuesday night. Everton are at Fulham, who've got a point to prove, having lost out in 2 cups in the last week. Nottingham Forest host Arsenal. We could come out of Tuesday night, out of the bottom 3, with so much positivity. And I'm really looking forward to Tuesday night.
I am as well, absolutely. That's why I think that the impact of that Woodrow goal has huge knock-on ramifications, as it did when he scored the Norwich goal last season. Last-minute goals always do, but the confidence factor that it gives, and if Luton can bounce into this and get a result, and if it is going to be high-scoring, we haven't done the predictions yet, but like you say, it's going to be high-scoring. it's going to be an exciting one for sure. So I'm really looking forward to it, because I think immediately after that first game, if you said you were going to have to play Brighton again, you'd feel a bit concerned, because they were very good, and they will still be very good on Tuesday. But Luton have improved so much.
We have, and hopefully we'll find out exactly in sort of on-pitch evidence of that, even though we all know that it is. We'll kind of see the margins of that improvement with our own eyes. You just mentioned score predictions then. Let's finish off this podcast with the score predictions. I'll let you go first, as you're going for 2 on the trot. Luton versus Brighton, how does it finish?
I do think it's going to be high scoring as well. But I fancy Luton to nick it, so I'm going to go for a very ambitious 3-2.
All the great Luton wins are 3-2. Pretty much 5 years to the night of the Portsmouth game as well, it will be, won't it?
Mm-hmm.
Which was also 3-2. If we get half the excitement of that Portsmouth game, if Ross Barkley wants to score a free kick, it's not going to snow. Fortunately, it's not going to snow. But everything else is all made up for a similar night to that Portsmouth night. Yeah, I think it'll be high scoring as well. It's exactly the same score. I'm going for 3-2 to Luton. It's just our score, isn't it? 3-2.
It is.
3-2 Luton. 3-2 both ways then for me and James. We're expecting high scoring game, which is in contrast to their last 2 games. As I say, drew 0-0. How do you see it going? Plenty of correct score predictions have come our way in the last 2 league game podcasts. So give us a shout out. Haven't given you much time to do this one. We apologise for that. It's not our fault. Some idiot's gone and stuck a midweek game in there when we could have had a free Premier League game last weekend. That would have been nice, wouldn't it? But hopefully we've given you enough time to give you a score prediction. Let us have it. As always, we will shout you out in the review podcast, which we will have out Thursday morning or Thursday at some point, depending on how much news may or may not break on Wednesday. That is it for this episode of the podcast. Just a few things to quickly tidy up. Unfortunately, the Trust quiz for Thursday night has had to be postponed due to unforeseen circumstances. It was pretty hectic time anyway, so on evidence of some feedback from our members, we've decided to push it back, because obviously it's 3 games this week. It's an under 21 game as well, and people just can't be out every single night of the week. There is a new date in the pipeline. We'll obviously advertise that as soon as we've got it confirmed with the club. So the quiz will take place, it just will not take place on Thursday. If you want a refund on your ticket, then that is available, or if you want to wait until the new date's confirmed and then decide, that's also up to you. Please keep all of your comments coming. I've keep on forgetting to do it, but when we shouted out John from Australia previously, James, we were inundated with people from Australia and New Zealand telling us that they watch the podcast from Australia and New Zealand. It's absolutely fantastic to have so many of you international viewers and subscribers. Give us a shout out wherever it is that you watch this podcast from. We'd love to know.
A couple in LA as well.
Yeah, we'd love to know the far reaches of the world where you're watching or listening to this podcast, just sort of for our own nosiness, really, if that's a word, just to see how far and wide we're getting. Thanks to everyone who was subscribed. There will be details of that giveaway that we've promised you in the pipeline. When we announce the details, you'll know exactly why there's just a slight delay. Just 1 or 2 dates need to be cleared up for us before we can get that out there and sort it out. As always, trust memberships are available, particularly if you're an overseas member. If you've got a supporters group, then we are doing international hatters. There's a whole sort of section on our website where we promote all of the international supporters groups. So if you meet up and watch Luton games, or even if you don't, there's just a few of you, let us know and we'll make sure that we get you on our website and try and help you sort of publicise your group. As you can see down in the front, or you could have done before we zoomed in earlier, the Scandinavian hatters are obviously popular overseas supporters, and we love having those, and we're looking forward to having those back later in the season too. So give us a shout out wherever it is you're from in the world. We really appreciate all your support.
The Japanese supporter trust might be very keen in a few games that time if the transfer news comes through about the international player who I've still not memorised the name of.
Absolutely. Town are going to go big in, Asia, I guess. Daiki Hashioka. Now, I can't say any opposition names, but I've got this guy sorted out. I haven't checked Pitsy, though. I might be butchering it. If I am, I apologise. He probably doesn't understand me, so that's all good anyway. But that is it for this episode of the podcast. Let us have your score predictions. Let us know where it is in the world that you're following us from. We'll give you a shout out if you're successful in the review podcast. Do keep subscribing, please. Although we've gone past 1,000, the more subscribers we can get, the better guests we can get for you. And as I said in previous podcasts, give us a shout out who you'd like to see on the podcast, and we'll do our very best to make that happen. Thanks for your company, James. Really hope that the game that we've previewed is the game that we watch, and it's not one of their 0-0 draws that we've that they've succumbed us to previously. Thanks to the Hightown Club as always for hosting the podcast, to Sean Grant and the Wolfgang for our intro music. Are you giving it another plug?
Yeah, why not? If you like the intro music, then Sean Grant and the Wolfgang will be playing live at the Castle in Luton Town Centre on Thursday. That's as part of the Independent Venue Week lineup of shows that the venue have got there, which is a massive coup for Luton as the only venue in Bedfordshire to do it, and it's part of their drive to make that into a proper small room grassroots live music venue for Luton, because we haven't really got any. So get yourself down to that. That's on part of the Vandalism Begins at Home lineup. So I'll be there. Get down the front.
Yep. Great to support the Luton music scene, get it thriving once again. So if you do enjoy the intro music, that might well be for you. And obviously to Ed Smith, creative, for all the designs that you see on set. Until next time, which will be, as I say, hopefully at some point on Thursday. Well, it will be at some point on Thursday for the review of this Brighton match. Until then, enjoy the game if you're going, be loud and proud, and come on, you Hatters.
I love this town. I love this town. I love this town. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got these massive souls.
We're Luton people.